Hey, so we got the styling of our first project. Now it's time for the actual code and the logic. I'll start by setting up that this box, this puzzle box, this section is only visible when a name was entered, and that this name will then appear here and here, even though that will be invisible later then, but for now, let's just make sure that the setup works. Now in my puzzle component here, I actually won't write very much code inside my class, so not that much of JavaScript code in here. I will control almost my complete app here only by using template expressions, and this will show you how powerful Angular 2 templates are. Now the first thing is I have my input field here where the name should be entered. And I will give this a local variable which I will call name. Remember, through this local variable, we'll be able to access this whole input element, which includes the value. And the value is what we're interested in. So I have this name local variable attached to it. And also remember, I need to add like a dummy event to update the UI when something is entered. Otherwise, well, the name local variable would hold my input element, but the value would not update. So this is the setup for my input element here. Now for this section here, I want to have it like, invisible if no name was entered. So I'm going to use the CSS property display that will allow us to set the display to none or block depending on whether we want to display it or not. So for this, I'll again use my shortcut style directive here and access the display CSS property. And I use a condition here which says if name.value, so the value of my name local variable which is bound to this input element, if this value here equals nothing, so if the input field is empty, well then the display should be set to none. Otherwise, it will be set to block. And don't forget the single quotation marks around all those values here. So let's save this, and boom, it's gone. And if we enter something, it appears. And if we delete it, it's gone, there, gone. Yeah, so I think you get the trick. So this is how we display it. Now we want to conditionally attach some styling to it. Now for this to work, I first have to implement the logic for our whole puzzle to determine if it's solved or not. So for this, let's go to these switches here and give each input element here, each switch, well, just another local variable. Switch 1, switch 2, switch 3, and switch 4. And well, don't worry, in later lectures of this course, we will find very comfortable ways of managing forms, and we won't have to attach local variables to all our input fields, which would get very annoying if we have forms with a lot of input fields and we would have to manage them all by ourselves through those local variables. But for now, that's just fine, because that is what we learned so far. So got my switch local variable set here, and now in my actual class here at the bottom, I'll add the values those switches should have when the puzzle is solved. So what will happen is that when this component is loaded, I will randomly set a value 0 or 1 for each of these switches. These should have values will then be stored in the properties I'm creating now. And then we will be able to check if what the user entered here is actually the same as what it should be, which is stored in our class. So I will call this switch1 should be active, maybe number. So this is the number it should have, or let me just call it switch1 number. That's shorter. So this will be the goal which should be entered, and I'm doing this for all 4 switches here. Obviously there would be other ways to do it, but I'll just manage it this way. Switch 4 number being the last property. Now currently they're not set to anything, but I will take care about this pretty soon. Now with those switches set to these values here, or currently not, but soon they will, with these switches or these target values here available, I'm now able to insert a check, a conditional check up here. Now, I will use another directive here, and let me structure this over several lines so that we can clearly see everything, which will be the ng class directive. Now, important thing here, we had the, new line, the class name directive, right? And I said, well, this is just a shortcut here, just like this style directive here. Both of those, the class and the style directive, have like normal directives with the syntax we know from other directives too, without this dot thing here, because as I said, those are really just shortcuts, which you can also use. Now, if we have, let's say, ng class is awesome like we had before, and then, just true, which would always attach this class here. The equivalent would be ng class and then a JavaScript object here. And in this object, we would have a key or a property of the class name, so is awesome. And then whether it should be displayed or not, so true or false, or any expression which resolves to true or false. So those 2 lines here are completely identical. Let me actually show that by not using is awesome, but by using the puzzle class we created. So I'll comment out this line, I'll save this, and I enter something here. And just make sure to, I'll just cut it for now because commenting out will throw an error. So now, if I enter something, you can see it has this puzzle class. Because if I remove this line and save it, well, it has no styling. Now let me insert this again, so the other form by using ng class, and let me save this. You can see it has this puzzle class again. So those 2 notations are completely the same, and you can use whatever you like. And maybe this is more understandable because it follows the standard way of using directives in Angular 2. Just squared brackets, name of the directive, and then the expression here, and not this weird shortcut here, even though, it has its merits if you only want to attach 1 class. Well, why I'm telling you that? By the way, now that I'm on it, for style, it would be ng style and then the same logic. So we would have a JavaScript object here with display, and then we can use this expression here to determine if it's true or false. So again, the key is the name of the CSS property, and the value, so to say, is an expression which will resolve to true or false. So let me save this. As you can see, it's also hidden, and it appears if I enter something. So it works the same way. And I'll leave it like that for now, because I personally tend to prefer that way of writing it, even though it is a bit longer, but it is more in line with all the other directives. Why was I telling you that in the first place? Well, to begin with, so that you know both ways of writing it, and that these shortcuts look a little bit less strange. And additionally, because here we're not only attaching 1 class, the puzzle class, but we're attaching also the solved class when it has been solved, right? So this class here, well, this is always attached. Now, when do we attach the solved class? I will just structure that over several lines so that we can easily read it. The solved class, now it would always be attached. Now, if I save this, and I have to make sure I have like this comma here. So now if I enter this, it's always green because the solved class is always attached and it's overwriting the red setting. Now, that is what we set up in our CSS file. Now I don't want to set this to true all the time. I want to have an expression here which checks if the puzzle has been solved, right? So to do this, I'll check if the switch1 value, so the value I'm referring with switch1, I'm referring to this local variable, which is bound to this input field here, and with this dot value, I'm accessing the value of this input field. If this is the same as our switch1 number, and I'm only using double equal signs here because, well, this will be a number, whereas the value of our input field will always be a string. And if I were using 3 equal signs, the type would have to be equal, which will not be the case. If I use 2 signs, well, then just the value has to be the same, which will be the case. So switch1 value should be the same as the switch1 number property we're defining down here. And, well, I will just copy this a couple of times, and obviously this is gets very long now, but for now this is fine. We'll do this all in our templates. So here switch1 should be the same as switch2, switch3 the same as switch3, and switch4 obviously the same as our switch4 number. If this is equal, then this will return to true and it will be solved. Now if I save this here, enter something, it's not solved because, well, it isn't set to anything here, so it will never return true because this is always set to something, it's an empty string, whereas this is never set to something at the moment, right? So, but this will be the logic we'll be using. So this is the basic setup, so we can display this box if we enter something here, that we have the conditions we need here to style our section, our puzzle section, depending on the outcome. And in the next and last video of this project, we'll actually create our random number generator, which will start the puzzle, so to say, and we will implement all the logic we need to be able to solve it and have all the stylings the way we want. See you in the next video. Bye.